Hey, this is Senator Justin Reedy coming to you from Annapolis at the end of the 8th week of the 2023 General Assembly session. So much has been going on this week, it's actually hard to encapsulate it into 3 or 4 minutes. But I wanted to share with you, I think, something that is really important that our Republican caucus in both the House and the Senate are pushing hard on, and that's real solutions for the violent crime crisis that is gripping our state. It's been a big problem in Baltimore City, but it's become really a regional issue because not just violent crime with involving adults, but our juveniles, and we're seeing more and more juvenile crime, and it's getting more and more severe. So it's a huge concern that we have. So this week on Thursday, the Senate Republican Caucus, including myself and the House Republican Caucus, joined together to do a press conference, really spotlighting several bills that we're putting out there to really solve issues in the law that make it harder to have real accountability for crime and really make sure that people who commit violent crimes are, in the case of offenders that are repeatedly violent, they need to be in jail, to get real strong penalties for juvenile crime, and making sure that law enforcement and prosecutors have the tools that they need. The first bill that we spotlighted was HB 753, which revolves juvenile gun offenses. Unfortunately, last year, legislation was passed by the liberal Democrat supermajority here, and then they overrode Governor Hogan's veto of it, that basically said if you're under the age of 13, law enforcement really can't be involved if you are involved in any kind of criminal activity, which none of us want to see or would want an 11 or 12-year-old being put in jail, for some period of time. But in the case of an Anne Arundel County youth that brought a 12-year-old that brought a loaded handgun to Anne Arundel County school last month, there was nothing law enforcement really could do to be engaged in that process. So it ends up being referred almost like it's a discipline issue inside the school. But obviously, that's something where law enforcement, school administration, and parents need to be brought together and say, what is going on here? And there has to be some sort of threat of real severe consequences, even for a 12-year-old, to make sure that we're solving this issue on the front end. And so this bill seeks to restore that element to our juvenile justice law, and it does some other positive things in the juvenile justice space. We also have legislation that I filed, Senate Bill 564, we had the hearing on also Thursday, that would make the theft of a handgun a felony and have the penalty be up to 3 years in jail for a first offense and up to 5 years for a second offense. Right now, if you steal a handgun and the value is less than $1,500, which is often the case, it's treated as a misdemeanor, and it's just no different than stealing, some clothes or some piece of property that is less than $1,500. It's important to make it a felony for a couple of reasons. One is it sends a message that many times these stolen handguns are used almost always in some sort of crime, sometimes in really bad crimes, but almost always if someone is stealing a handgun, it's not to go out and shoot skeet. It's because they have bad intentions. And we want to make sure that those kind of folks are given real swift and severe penalties and sanctions. Also, if you steal a handgun, you should be on the prohibited persons list for carrying a firearm. And right now, because it's not a felony, you're still on the list of people who it's fine to carry. I think if you're stealing a handgun, you should not be able to do that. So that's another thing the bill, by making a felony, it would address that issue. We also have Senate Bill 744, which is our Violent Firearm Offender Act. What we're doing is this bill is targeting repeat violent offenders. And we've passed this bill through the Senate a couple of times, but we weren't able to get it out of the House of Delegates. And so we're really making a push this year to let's get it all the way through the process, because here's what it does. And I can't believe anybody in their right mind would disagree with what this bill does. It raises using a firearm in a violent crime from a misdemeanor to a felony. Meaning right now, if you're in, there's a whole list of violent crimes in state law. They range from obviously things like murders and assaults to other types of crimes, but they're considered violent crimes, rape, there's other things. If you use a gun in the commission of that, meaning not just you have a gun with you, but the gun is a part of what happens, that's an additional misdemeanor. It ought to be a felony. It ought to be absolutely a felony, because here's what happens. Sometimes people will plead down and they'll plead away the charge and they'll plead to the misdemeanor. So we want to have that be a felony. Number two, there's a drug dealer loophole in our law where drug dealers are not subject to the same rules. If you can believe this, it's incredible. If they use a gun in a commission of drug dealing, that's not considered the same as if some other criminal uses a gun. it's fascinating in a bad way how that's in our law, but we want to close that loophole. They should be obviously treated the same as any other criminal that would use a gun. It also increases penalties for repeat violent offenses. It increases penalties so that you're having a 10-year jail sentence for a second violent offense using a firearm. And it also makes knowingly selling a firearm to someone who plans to use it in the commission of a crime a felony. So if someone has what's called actual knowledge, not you might have known, but you have to have actual knowledge that you're selling a gun to somebody or giving a gun to somebody and they're going to go use it in a crime, which happens unfortunately in Baltimore all the time. That makes that a felony as well. And there's real jail time associated with that. A lot of that is really getting at the issues we're seeing in Baltimore City, but now it's happening all over the place. We're trying to be very thoughtful in our approach. We're pushing for real strong criminal penalties. And we're hoping we've gotten some bipartisan support. There's some of our Democratic colleagues that support these bills. We're really pushing to try to get votes on these and get these out so that we can start to really hack at the triage that's going on. We've got to triage some of these terrible things that are happening and get these violent criminals off the streets. And so that's a big focus of our caucuses and myself. And that's one of the big things that we focused on this week. Again, I always appreciate being able to update you and for your input and advice and your thoughts. Please feel free to reach out anytime. And I hope you have a great weekend. God bless.